The morning sun cast long shadows across the shooting range as Commander Jake Morrison arrived for his weekly training session. After 15 years as a Navy SEAL, he could read people like an open book. The way they held their weapon, their stance, their breathing patterns, everything told a story about who they were and where they came from. But the woman at Lane 7 caught his attention for all the wrong reasons. She stood perfectly still, her feet planted shoulder-width apart, her grip on the pistol textbook perfect. Her breathing was controlled, methodical. When she fired, the shots rang out in a steady rhythm that spoke of countless hours of practice. This wasn't some weekend warrior or curious beginner. This was someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Jake watched from his peripheral vision as she emptied magazine after magazine with surgical precision. Each bullet found its mark in the center ring of her target. Her movements were fluid, automatic, like she was performing a dance she had done 1,000 times before. There was something almost military about her posture, yet she wore civilian clothes, jeans, a simple black t-shirt, and worn sneakers. What really made Jake pause was her eyes. Even from a distance, he could see the way she scanned the range before each reload, checking every corner, every person. It was the same habit he had developed during his years in special operations. The same paranoid awareness that kept soldiers alive in hostile territory. When she finished her session, she methodically cleaned her weapon with the efficiency of a trained professional. Jake pretended to focus on his own shooting, but he was actually studying her technique. She handled the pistol like it was an extension of her own body. Every movement was precise, practiced, and purposeful. As she packed up her gear, Jake noticed something else. Despite her obvious skill, she kept to herself. She didn't make small talk with the range officer, didn't nod at other shooters, didn't engage in the casual conversation that was common at the range. She was there for business, nothing more. The woman slung her bag over her shoulder and headed for the exit. As she passed Jake's lane, he got a better look at her face. She was probably in her early 30s, with short brown hair and sharp green eyes that seemed to take in everything around her. There were faint lines around those eyes, not from age, but from squinting in bright sunlight, the kind of weathering that came from spending time in harsh environments. Jake found himself curious about this mysterious woman. In his line of work, he had met plenty of skilled shooters, fellow SEALs, special forces operators, CIA agents, and law enforcement officers. But this woman didn't fit any of those profiles. She was too careful, too isolated, too much like someone who was trying very hard not to be noticed. After she left, Jake walked over to Lane 7 to inspect her target. What he saw made him whistle low under his breath. Every single shot was clustered in a group no bigger than a silver dollar, right in the center of the bullseye. This level of accuracy took years to develop, and even then, only the most dedicated marksman could achieve it consistently. Jake made a mental note to pay attention if he saw her again. Something about the woman intrigued him, though he couldn't quite put his finger on what it was. Maybe it was professional curiosity, or maybe it was the recognition of a kindred spirit, someone who had clearly seen action and knew how to handle themselves in dangerous situations. As he packed up his own gear, Jake wondered what brought someone with her obvious skills to a civilian shooting range in the middle of suburban Virginia. Most former military or law enforcement personnel he knew either worked for private security companies or had moved on to completely different careers. But this woman seemed to be maintaining her edge, practicing regularly, staying sharp for reasons he could only guess at. The next week, Jake arrived at the range at the same time, hoping to see her again. He told himself it was just curiosity, but there was something about her that he couldn't shake. She had the bearing of someone who had been through serious training, but also the caution of someone who was hiding from something, or someone. When she showed up right on schedule, taking the same Lane 7, Jake knew his instincts had been right. This woman was operating on a routine, and routines like that were usually born from necessity rather than convenience. Whatever her story was, Jake had a feeling it was more complicated than it appeared on the surface. 3 weeks had passed since Jake first noticed the mysterious woman, and she had shown up every Tuesday morning without fail. Always Lane 7, always the same routine, always keeping to herself. Jake found himself adjusting his own schedule to match hers, telling himself it was just coincidence but knowing better. On this particular Tuesday, Fate finally gave him the opportunity he had been waiting for. Jake was loading a fresh magazine when he heard the distinctive sound of a weapon jamming from lane 7. He looked over to see the woman examining her pistol with the calm efficiency of someone who had dealt with mechanical failures before. But when she tried to clear the jam, Jake noticed her wince slightly and favor her left hand. Without thinking, he set down his own weapon and walked over to her lane. "Need a hand with that?" he asked, keeping his voice casual and non-threatening. The woman looked up at him with those sharp green eyes, and Jake could see her quickly assessing whether he was a threat or just a helpful stranger. After a moment, she nodded. "Slide stuck," she said simply, her voice carrying just a hint of an accent he couldn't quite place. Jake examined the pistol, a well-maintained Glock 19, and quickly identified the problem. A spent casing had failed to eject properly and was wedged in the ejection port. "Classic stovepipe," he said, working to clear the jam. "Happens to the best of us." As he worked, he noticed the woman watching his technique carefully. When he handed the weapon back to her, she tested the action a few times before nodding her approval. "Thanks," she said. "You know your way around a pistol." "Occupational hazard," Jake replied with a slight smile. "I'm Jake, by the way." "Sarah," she said after a brief hesitation. Jake noticed the pause and filed it away. Either Sarah wasn't her real name, or she wasn't used to introducing herself to strangers. Both possibilities were interesting. "You're here every Tuesday," Jake observed, trying to keep the conversation going. "Same time, same lane. Military background?" Something flickered in Sarah's eyes. Caution, maybe even alarm. "Something like that," she said carefully. "What about you? You handle weapons like you've had some serious training." "Navy," Jake said, keeping his answer vague. He had learned long ago that admitting to being a SEAL often made people uncomfortable or overly curious. "Did some time overseas." Sarah nodded, and Jake could see her relaxing slightly. Military veterans often found common ground quickly, even when they couldn't share details about their service. "Mind if I ask about your technique?" Jake said. "Your groupings are impressive. Professional level." For the first time, Sarah almost smiled. "Practice," she said. "Lots and lots of practice." They talked for a few more minutes about firearms and training, keeping the conversation surface level but comfortable. Jake noticed that Sarah was careful not to reveal any specific details about her background, her training, or what she did for work. She deflected personal questions with the skill of someone who had done it many times before. When she packed up to leave, Jake decided to take a chance. "Same time next week?" he asked. Sarah paused at her bag and looked at him for a long moment. Jake could see her weighing the risks and benefits of maintaining contact with him. Finally, she nodded. "Probably," she said. As she walked away, Jake found himself more intrigued than ever. The brief conversation had confirmed his suspicions that Sarah had serious military or law enforcement training, but it had also raised new questions. Why was she so careful about personal information? Why did she seem constantly alert, even in the relatively safe environment of a shooting range? Over the next few weeks, Jake and Sarah developed a routine of their own. They would nod to each other when they arrived, sometimes chat briefly between shooting sessions, and occasionally offer each other tips on technique or equipment. Sarah was clearly knowledgeable about a wide variety of weapons and tactics, but she never volunteered information about where she had learned these skills. Jake began to notice small details that most people would miss. Sarah always parked in a spot where she could see the entrance to the range. She never turned her back on the door for more than a few seconds. She carried herself with the controlled tension of someone who was always ready for trouble. But what really caught Jake's attention was the way she sometimes touched her left shoulder, especially when she thought no one was looking. It was an unconscious gesture that spoke of old pain, maybe from an injury that hadn't quite healed right. The more Jake observed Sarah, the more convinced he became that she was hiding something significant. But he also began to sense that whatever she was hiding from, it wasn't just professional discretion or natural shyness. This was someone who had good reason to be careful, someone who understood that the wrong person knowing the wrong information could be dangerous. Jake found himself protective of Sarah's privacy, even as his curiosity grew stronger. Whatever her story was, he had a feeling it was going to be more complicated and more dangerous than he had originally thought. The breakthrough came on a sweltering Tuesday morning in July. Jake arrived at the range to find Sarah already there, but something was different. She was moving more stiffly than usual, and when she raised her pistol, he could see her jaw clench with pain. After her first magazine, Sarah paused longer than usual, rolling her left shoulder and flexing her fingers. Jake had seen enough combat injuries to recognize the signs of someone pushing through serious discomfort. "You okay over there?" he called out during a break in the shooting. Sarah glanced at him, and for a split second her guard dropped. Jake saw exhaustion in her eyes, the kind that came from fighting pain for too long. "Just a twinge," she said, but her voice lacked its usual steadiness. Jake watched as she attempted to reload, but her left hand wasn't cooperating properly. The magazine slipped from her fingers and clattered to the concrete floor. Sarah stared at it for a moment, and Jake could see her frustration building. "Hey," Jake said, moving to the lane next to hers. "Why don't you take a break? I've got some ibuprofen in my bag if you need it." Sarah looked at him for a long moment, and Jake could see her internal struggle. Finally, her shoulders sagged slightly in defeat. "Thanks," she said quietly. As Jake retrieved the pain medication from his range bag, he noticed Sarah absently rubbing her left shoulder again. This time her t-shirt rode up slightly, revealing just a hint of what looked like a tattoo near her collarbone. "Old injury?" Jake asked, handing her the pills and a bottle of water. Sarah nodded, swallowing the medication. "Occupational hazard," she said, echoing his words from their first conversation. They sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, neither of them shooting. The range was quieter than usual, with only one other person at the far end working with a rifle. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah said suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake nodded, sensing that whatever she was about to say was important. "Do you ever feel like you're living a lie?" she asked, staring at her hands. "Like the person everyone thinks you are isn't really who you are at all?" The question hit Jake harder than he expected. He thought about all the times he had deflected questions about his work, all the stories he couldn't tell, all the operations that officially never happened. "Every day," he said honestly. Sarah looked at him with surprise, as if she hadn't expected such a direct answer. "It gets exhausting," she said. "Yeah, it does," Jake agreed. "But sometimes we don't have a choice." They were quiet again, but it was a different kind of silence now. More comfortable, more understanding. "Jake," Sarah said finally, "what would you do if you found out everything you thought you knew about someone was wrong?" "Depends," Jake said carefully. "Would they still be the same person where it counts?" Sarah considered this for a moment. "I think so. But their whole life, everything they've told people about themselves would be a lie." Jake studied her face, seeing the real anguish there. This wasn't a hypothetical question. This was someone wrestling with whether to trust him with something important. "In my experience," Jake said slowly, "people lie for two reasons. Either they want to hurt someone, or they're trying to protect someone. Maybe themselves, maybe others. The reason matters more than the lie itself." Sarah nodded, but she didn't say anything else. When she finally stood up to leave, Jake could see she was still in pain. "Sarah," he called as she reached the exit. She turned back to look at him. "Whatever it is you're carrying," Jake said, "you don't have to carry it alone." For a moment, Sarah's carefully constructed walls seemed to crack. Jake saw vulnerability there and fear, but also something that might have been hope. "I'll see you next week," she said, and there was something different in her voice. Not quite trust, but maybe the possibility of it. After she left, Jake found himself staring at Lane 7 for a long time. Something had shifted between them today. Some invisible barrier had been lowered. He had the distinct feeling that Sarah was on the verge of telling him something important. Something that would change everything he thought he knew about her. The question was whether she would find the courage to do it, or whether whatever she was hiding from would catch up to her first. Jake packed up his gear with a growing sense of urgency. His instincts, honed by years of dangerous missions, were telling him that Sarah was in some kind of trouble. Real trouble, the kind that didn't just go away on its own. As he drove home, Jake made a decision. Next week, he was going to find a way to get Sarah to open up to him. Because whatever secret she was carrying, whatever danger she might be facing, she was right about one thing. It was exhausting to face it alone. And Jake had the feeling that time was running out. The following Tuesday, Sarah didn't show up. Jake waited at the range for over an hour, checking his watch every few minutes and glancing toward the entrance. It was the first time in 2 months that she had missed their unofficial appointment. By noon, he was genuinely worried. He spent the rest of the week thinking about her, replaying their last conversation in his head. Something about her question, about living a lie, had felt desperate, like someone on the edge of making a difficult decision. The next Tuesday, Jake arrived early and claimed Lane 7, hoping Sarah would show up and see him there. When she finally walked through the door, he felt a wave of relief that surprised him with its intensity. But something was wrong. Sarah looked tired, more tired than he had ever seen her. There were dark circles under her eyes, and she kept glancing over her shoulder as if expecting trouble. "Sorry I missed last week," she said without preamble as she approached Lane 7. "Something came up." "Everything okay?" Jake asked, moving over to give her space. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, loading her magazine with shaking hands. Jake noticed that her usual precision was off. She dropped several rounds and had to pick them up. "Sarah," Jake said gently. "What's going on?" She looked at him then, and Jake saw fear in her eyes. "Real bone-deep fear? Can I trust you?" she asked suddenly. "Yes," Jake said without hesitation. Sarah stared at him for another moment, then made a decision that seemed to surprise even her. "Not here," she said quietly. "Too public. Meet me at Murphy's Diner on Route 7 at 2 o'clock. If you're really military intelligence or federal law enforcement, don't come. I'll know if you bring backup." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "Sarah, what kind of trouble are you in?" "The kind that gets people killed," she said simply. At exactly 2 o'clock, Jake walked into Murphy's Diner, a rundown place that had seen better days. Sarah was already there, sitting in a corner booth with her back to the wall and a clear view of both the front door and the back exit. She had changed from her range clothes into jeans and a hoodie, but Jake could see the tension in her posture. He slid into the booth across from her, noting that she had chosen a table far enough from the other patrons that they couldn't be overheard. "Before I tell you anything," Sarah said without preamble, "I need to know exactly what kind of Navy you were in." Jake had been expecting this question. "SEALs," he said quietly. "Team 6. 3 tours in Afghanistan, 2 in Iraq, plus some other places that don't officially exist." Sarah nodded as if this confirmed something she had already suspected. "That explains the way you move, the way you watch people. I thought maybe CIA, but your tells are more military than intelligence. What about you?" Jake asked. "And don't tell me something like that again. After what you just said about people getting killed, I think we're past casual evasions." Sarah was quiet for so long that Jake thought she might not answer. Then she reached up and slowly pulled down the neckline of her hoodie, revealing her left collarbone. Jake stared at what he saw there and felt his blood turn to ice. Tattooed in small, precise letters just below her collarbone were the words "officially dead," followed by a date from 3 years ago. "My name isn't Sarah," she said quietly. "It's Lieutenant Commander Elena Vasquez, United States Navy, formerly of Naval Special Warfare Development Group. Formerly of a lot of things, actually." Jake's mind raced. DevGru was the official name for SEAL Team 6. This woman was, or had been, one of the most elite special operations soldiers in the world. But the tattoo suggested something far more complex and dangerous. "What does officially dead mean?" Jake asked, though he was afraid he already knew. Elena looked around the diner again, checking for threats that Jake couldn't see. "It means that 3 years ago, Lieutenant Commander Elena Vasquez died in a classified operation in Syria. There was a funeral, a flag ceremony, the whole thing. My parents got a folded flag and a letter of condolence from the Secretary of the Navy." "But you're sitting right here," Jake said. "No," Elena said firmly. "Elena Vasquez is dead. I'm Sarah Mitchell, civilian. I have the papers to prove it, the whole backstory, everything. The Navy made sure of that when they burned my identity to save their own asses." Jake felt pieces of a puzzle clicking into place, but the picture they formed was darker than anything he had imagined. "What happened in Syria?" Elena's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her coffee cup. "We were sent to extract a high-value target, someone who supposedly had intel on an imminent terrorist attack. Except when we got there, it was a setup. The whole thing was a trap." She paused, staring into her coffee as if seeing the past in its dark surface. "My team was compromised before we even hit the ground. Someone had sold us out, fed the enemy our exact coordinates, our timing, everything. We walked into an ambush." Jake waited, knowing there was more and that it was going to be bad. "I was the only survivor," Elena said quietly. 5 good people died because someone in our own government decided they were expendable. When I tried to investigate, when I started asking questions about who had access to our mission parameters, suddenly I became a problem too. So they killed you off, Jake said. Understanding now. Car bomb in Damascus, Elena said with bitter humor. Very convenient. No body to recover. Just enough DNA evidence to satisfy the paperwork. Elena Vasquez died a hero, and Sarah Mitchell was born with a new social security number and a burning desire to find out who murdered her team. Jake sat in stunned silence, trying to process what Elena had just told him. The woman he had known as Sarah, skilled, cautious, always watching the exits, suddenly made perfect sense. She wasn't just being careful. She was staying alive. Who else knows you're alive? Jake asked. Besides you? Maybe 3 people in the world, Elena said. The Navy handler who arranged my new identity, a contact at the State Department who helped with the paperwork, and my former commanding officer who's been feeding me information when he can. What kind of information? Elena pulled out her phone and showed Jake a series of encrypted messages. For the past 3 years, I've been tracking everyone who had access to our mission details in Syria. The list started with about 40 people. It's down to 12 now. Jake felt a chill. What happened to the other 28? Some retired, some transferred to different departments. Some just disappeared into the bureaucracy, Elena said. But 6 of them died in accidents over the past 2 years. Car crashes, hunting accidents, home invasions gone wrong. The kind of coincidences that aren't really coincidences. Someone's cleaning house, Jake realized. Someone's making sure that anyone who might connect the dots ends up dead, Elena confirmed. Which is why I need to find them before they find me. Jake studied the messages on her phone, recognizing the encryption patterns from his own classified communications. Your CO is taking a big risk helping you. Commander Hayes was like a father to me, Elena said. He trained me, promoted me, recommended me for DevGru. When my team died, it nearly destroyed him. He knows something isn't right, but he can't investigate officially without blowing my cover. So you're investigating unofficially. I've been tracking financial records, communication logs, travel patterns, anything that might point to who sold us out. Elena explained. It's slow work and I have to be careful. Too many inquiries in the wrong places and people start asking questions. Jake looked at Elena's tired eyes, the tension in her shoulders, the way she kept checking the exits even now. This is killing you, he said quietly. Maybe, Elena admitted. But I can't let it go. Those 5 people died because someone betrayed them. They had families, people who loved them. They deserved better than being sacrificed for someone else's agenda. What about you? Jake asked. What about your family? Your parents think you're dead. Pain flashed across Elena's face. That's the hardest part. My mom, she writes letters to me sometimes, to my grave. Commander Hayes passes them along through the network. She talks about how proud she was of me, how much she misses me. Elena's voice cracked slightly. She had a heart attack 6 months ago. I wanted so badly to be there, to hold her hand, to tell her I was okay. But I couldn't risk it. If the wrong people saw me, if someone recognized me, it wouldn't just be me who paid the price. It would be her, my dad, maybe Hayes too. Jake reached across the table and covered her hand with his. Elena, you can't do this alone. 3 years of this kind of pressure, this kind of isolation, it's not sustainable. I know, she whispered. That's why I told you. I think I'm close to finding answers, but I also think they're getting close to finding me. What do you mean? Elena pulled up another message on her phone. 3 days ago, someone accessed my fake social security number. They didn't get far, the protections Hayes built into Sarah Mitchell's identity held. But they got far enough to know that someone named Sarah Mitchell exists, and that she lives in this area. Jake felt his protective instincts kick in. You think they've tracked you to Virginia? I think they've tracked me to this county, Elena said, which is why I missed last week. I was moving safe houses, switching cars, changing my patterns. But I can't run forever. So what's the plan? Elena looked at him with surprise. The plan? You said you think you're close to answers. What's your next move? Jake, I can't ask you to get involved in this. These people have already killed at least 11 people, probably more. They won't hesitate to kill you too. Elena, Jake said firmly, I've been in situations like this before. I know how to handle myself and I know how to watch your back. More importantly, you need backup. You said it yourself. This is the kind of trouble that gets people killed, and it usually kills people who try to face it alone. Elena stared at him for a long moment, and Jake could see her weighing the risks. Finally, she nodded. There's a defense contractor in D.C., she said. Meridian Strategic Solutions. They had 3 people with access to our Syria mission parameters. 2 of them are already dead. Car accident last year, apparent suicide 6 months ago. The 3rd one, a woman named Rachel Chen, disappeared 2 weeks ago. Disappeared how? She stopped showing up to work, stopped answering her phone, stopped posting on social media. Her apartment looks like she left in a hurry, but there's no record of her booking flights or hotels anywhere. Jake processed this information. You think she's running, or you think she's dead? I think she figured out that people were being eliminated and decided to disappear before it was her turn, Elena said. But here's the thing. If I can find her, she might have answers. She might know who's behind all this. And if we can't find her, Elena's expression hardened. Then we become the hunters instead of the hunted. Because I'm tired of running, Jake. I'm tired of being afraid, tired of being dead. It's time to end this one way or another. Jake nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. Sometimes the only way to stop being prey was to become the predator. Jake and Elena spent the next week planning their approach to finding Rachel Chen. Using Jake's connections and Elena's intelligence-gathering skills, they managed to track down several leads about where the missing defense contractor might have gone. The breakthrough came when Elena discovered that Rachel had a sister in Portland, Oregon, someone who lived completely off the grid. No social media, no credit cards, no digital footprint at all. It was exactly the kind of place someone would run if they were trying to disappear completely. They flew to Portland using fake identities that Jake had maintained from his SEAL days. Elena was impressed by how thoroughly he had prepared for the possibility of needing to disappear. Multiple passports, credit cards, even driver's licenses from different states. Old habits, Jake explained as they checked into a modest hotel near the airport. In my line of work, you learn to always have an exit strategy. Rachel's sister, Lucy Chen, lived in a converted warehouse in an industrial part of the city. When they arrived, Elena immediately noticed the security measures, cameras, reinforced doors, and what looked like motion sensors in the windows. Someone's definitely here, Elena said, studying the building, and they're expecting trouble. Jake knocked on the door, calling out that they were looking for Rachel and that they might be able to help her. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then slowly the door opened just wide enough for a chain lock to be visible. Who are you? A woman's voice asked from inside. My name is Jake Morrison, and this is Elena. We think your sister is in danger, and we think we know why. Elena's supposed to be dead, the voice said, and both Jake and Elena froze. The door opened wider, revealing a young Asian woman who looked remarkably like the photos they had seen of Rachel. But this wasn't Rachel. This was clearly her sister Lucy. Rachel told me someone might come looking for her, Lucy said. She said if anyone showed up claiming to know Elena Vasquez, I should listen to what they had to say. Elena stepped forward. She knows who I am. She knows you're the SEAL who was supposed to die in Syria, Lucy said. She also knows you're probably the only person who can help her figure out why everyone from that mission is being killed. Lucy led them into the warehouse, which had been converted into a surprisingly comfortable living space. In one corner, surrounded by multiple computer monitors and stacks of documents, sat Rachel Chen. She was smaller than Elena had expected, but her eyes were sharp and alert. When she saw Elena, she stood up immediately. Lieutenant Commander Elena Vasquez, Rachel said. I've been hoping you'd find me. How did you know I was alive? Elena asked. Because I helped design the communication systems that were supposed to keep your team safe in Syria, Rachel said. And I know they were compromised. I've been tracking the same pattern of deaths that you have, but from a different angle. Rachel led them over to her computer setup, which looked like something out of a spy movie. Multiple screens showed financial records, personnel files, and communication logs. I've been following the money, Rachel explained. Every operation like the one in Syria costs millions of dollars to plan and execute. That money has to come from somewhere, and it leaves trails. She pulled up a series of financial documents. 3 days before your team deployed to Syria, someone made a payment of $2.7 million to a shell company in the Cayman Islands. That same shell company made payments to known arms dealers in the region where your team was ambushed. Elena stared at the documents. Someone paid to have us killed. Not just killed, Rachel said. Setup. This wasn't random terrorism or bad intelligence. This was a deliberate assassination disguised as a failed rescue mission. Jake studied the financial records. Who made the payment? Rachel hesitated for a moment, then pulled up another document. That's where it gets complicated. The payment came from a Department of Defense black budget account, which means whoever ordered this had very high-level authorization. How high? Elena asked, though she was afraid of the answer. Assistant secretary level, maybe higher, Rachel said. We're talking about someone with access to the most classified operations in the military. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Elena had suspected corruption, maybe someone selling information to the enemy, but this was something far worse. This was someone in the highest levels of government actively ordering the deaths of American soldiers. Why? Jake asked. What could be worth killing a SEAL team? Rachel pulled up another set of documents. I think I know. Your team wasn't just sent to extract a high-value target. According to the mission briefing I found, you were sent to recover evidence of weapons trafficking between American defense contractors and Syrian rebel groups. Elena felt the pieces clicking into place. We were getting too close to something they wanted to keep buried. More than that, Rachel said. The weapons trafficking operation was worth hundreds of millions of dollars over several years. If that information had come to light, it would have brought down not just defense contractors but politicians, military officers, maybe even people in the intelligence community. So they killed us to protect their business, Elena said, her voice filled with cold fury. They tried to kill you, Jake corrected, but you survived and now you're the one person who can expose them. Rachel nodded. Which is why they're still hunting you. As long as you're alive, you're a threat to their operation. Elena stood up, pacing to the window. Do we know who specifically ordered the hit? Rachel pulled up one final document, a classified memo with most of the identifying information redacted. This is as far as I've been able to get. The order came from someone codenamed Patriot, but I haven't been able to identify who that is. Jake studied the memo, noting the security clearances and authorization levels. This person would have to be someone with access to JSOC operations, someone who could authorize payments from black budget accounts, and someone who could coordinate with defense contractors without raising red flags. That's a very short list of people, Elena said grimly. Rachel nodded, which is probably why they're working so hard to eliminate anyone who might be able to narrow it down further. Elena turned from the window, her face set with determination. Then we need to find Patriot before he finds us. Because I'm done running and I'm done hiding, it's time to bring this whole thing down. Jake looked at the evidence spread across Rachel's computers, understanding the magnitude of what they were facing. They weren't just hunting a single corrupt official. They were taking on a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of government and involved hundreds of millions of dollars. But Elena was right. The plan came together over the next 48 hours. Rachel had done more than just track financial records. She had been building a comprehensive case file, complete with evidence that could bring down the entire conspiracy. But they needed one more piece, the identity of Patriot. Elena's breakthrough came when she remembered something from her original mission briefing. There had been a last-minute change to their extraction point, authorized by someone who claimed to have better intelligence about enemy positions. At the time, it had seemed like good tactical planning. Now she realized it had been part of the trap. Only 3 people had the authority to change our extraction coordinates, Elena explained to Jake and Rachel. General Morrison at JSOC, Deputy Secretary Harrison at Defense, and Admiral Kessler at Naval Special Warfare Command. Jake looked up from the documents he was studying. Morrison is my uncle, he said quietly. Elena stared at him. What? General David Morrison is my father's brother, Jake said. I never mentioned it because we don't exactly have a warm relationship. He's career military. Think SEALs are cowboys who don't follow proper chain of command. Rachel was already pulling up files on all 3 suspects. Your uncle has access to everything. JSOC operations, black budget accounts, defense contractor relationships. He'd be in a perfect position to coordinate something like this. Elena felt sick. The man who might have ordered her team's death was Jake's own family. Jake, she said carefully, I know this is complicated because he's your uncle. But we have to consider the possibility that he's Patriot. Jake was quiet for a long moment, staring at a photo of General Morrison on Rachel's computer screen. He's not, he said finally. How can you be so sure? Rachel asked. Because he's an arrogant bastard, but he's not a traitor, Jake said. Uncle David has spent his entire life serving this country. He might be willing to bend rules to win wars, but he would never sell out American soldiers for money. Elena wanted to argue, but something in Jake's voice stopped her. He knew his uncle better than they did. Okay, she said. Then who? The answer came from an unexpected source. While they were debating the suspects, Rachel's computer chimed with an incoming message from Commander Hayes, Elena's former CO. The message was brief, but urgent. Patriot is Deputy Secretary Harrison. He's planning to eliminate remaining witnesses tomorrow. Location compromised. Run. Elena's blood went cold. How does Hayes know where we are? Rachel was already shutting down her computers and grabbing hard drives. He doesn't. But if he's warning us about tomorrow, that means Harrison's people have tracked us to Portland. Jake was at the window, scanning the street below. 2 black SUVs just pulled up outside. We need to go, now. They grabbed the essential evidence files and headed for the building's back exit, but Lucy was already waiting there with bad news. There are more men in the alley, she said. They have the building surrounded. Elena's mind raced through their options. They were trapped in a warehouse with armed hostiles closing in from all sides. It was exactly the kind of situation her SEAL training had prepared her for, except this time she was trying to protect civilians. The roof, Jake said, pointing to a ladder that led to a maintenance hatch. If we can get to the neighboring building, we might be able to get out through their fire escape. They climbed quickly, Elena leading the way with Jake bringing up the rear. Behind them, they could hear the sound of the warehouse's front door being breached. On the roof, Elena could see at least 6 men positioning themselves around the building's perimeter. Professional operators, probably ex-military contractors working for Harrison. There, Jake pointed to a fire escape on the building next door. The gap between buildings was about 8 feet, manageable for trained operatives, but risky for Rachel and Lucy. Elena made the jump first, then Jake. Together they helped Rachel and Lucy cross, with Jake literally catching Lucy when she came up short on her landing. They made it down to street level and were moving toward Jake's rental car when Elena heard the distinctive sound of a suppressed rifle. The rear window of a car 20 feet away exploded. "Sniper!" Jake called out, pushing the others toward cover behind a delivery truck. Elena scanned the rooftops, using tactics she had learned in urban warfare training. "There," she said, spotting the muzzle flash from a building across the street. "3rd floor, corner window. Can you take him?" Jake asked. Elena checked her pistol, the same Glock 19 she carried to the range every week. "Not from here. I need to get closer." What happened next was something Elena had never expected to do on American soil. Using every skill she had learned in 3 deployments, she began working her way toward the sniper's position, while Jake provided covering fire and kept Rachel and Lucy safe. It took her 12 minutes to reach the building and another 5 to climb to the 3rd floor. When she finally confronted the sniper, a man she didn't recognize but who clearly knew who she was, the encounter was brief and decisive. 20 minutes later, Elena rejoined Jake and the others with the sniper's rifle and a cell phone containing Harrison's direct orders to eliminate all witnesses and recover any evidence. "It's over," Elena said, showing them the phone. "Harrison's orders are right here in writing, along with payment confirmations and a list of everyone who's been killed. This is enough to bring him down." But Jake was looking at something else on the phone, a message that had come in while Elena was dealing with the sniper. "Elena," he said quietly, "look at this." The message was from Harrison to someone identified only as Asset. "Morrison compromised. Eliminate immediately. Use Syria protocols." Elena felt her world shift. "He's going after your uncle." Jake was already dialing his phone. "Uncle David? It's Jake. You need to listen to me very carefully. Your life is in danger. Get somewhere secure and call General Patterson at the Pentagon. Tell him Patriot is Deputy Secretary Harrison and that you have evidence of the Syria operation." There was a pause, then Jake nodded. "Good. We're coming to D.C. with proof of everything." 6 hours later, Elena walked into a secure conference room at the Pentagon. For the first time in 3 years, she was using her real name and her real identity. Deputy Secretary Harrison was already in custody, along with 4 defense contractors and 2 other Pentagon officials. General Morrison looked exactly like an older version of Jake, and when he saw Elena, his expression was a mixture of relief and regret. "Lieutenant Commander Vasquez," he said formally. Then his voice softened. "Elena, I'm sorry we couldn't protect you 3 years ago." "We didn't know how deep the corruption went?" Elena nodded. "It's over now, sir. What happens next?" Jake asked. General Morrison smiled grimly. "Next, we clean house. And Elena, whenever you're ready, the Navy would be honored to have you back. Your country owes you a debt that can never be fully repaid." Elena looked at Jake, then at the general. For 3 years she had been dead. Now finally she could start living again. "With respect, sir," she said, "I think I'd like to stay dead just a little while longer. There are some people I need to see first, starting with my parents." 3 months later, Elena stood at a grave in Arlington National Cemetery. The headstone read, "Lieutenant Commander Elena Vasquez, hero, daughter, patriot." But Elena wasn't there to mourn. She was there to say goodbye to the person she used to be. Jake stood beside her, understanding without words what this moment meant. "Ready?" he asked quietly. Elena nodded, touching the tattoo on her collarbone one last time. Soon she would have it changed. Instead of officially dead, it would read officially alive. As they walked away from the cemetery together, Elena felt something she hadn't experienced in 3 years. Hope for the future. She had her life back, her identity back, and most importantly, she had justice for the 5 brave soldiers who had died in Syria. The woman who had seemed like just another shooter at the range had turned out to be so much more. And sometimes, Jake reflected, the most important secrets were the ones that brought people together rather than drove them apart.